Great, thanks, Chris. It's a little unfair. Like I've been sitting in the other sessions, and they're all talking about technology before we get the chance to bring the thunder. But yeah, super excited. Thank you to you, Chris, and to Crowd Comfort for involving us in this. I think it's a very important dialogue, and I think one of the things that I've seen in the prior sessions is, clearly there's a connectivity between everything we're doing here, right? Workplace experience isn't just an application. There's a lot more around that. There's a lot of things founded in culture, founded in people. We are going to focus today very much on the technology side and really look to talk about three big topic questions. What does the future look like for the office from a technology perspective? How central, the question that I love, are employees in those decisions and those technologies? And then also the big one for us tech geeks is really looking at the impact of data. As a brief intro for those that don't know me, my name is Simon Davis. I run Workplace for a company called the Impec Group, and we really focus on helping organizations with agnostic decisions around what technology they need, what workplace strategy, culture, and transformation they need to best suit their business goals. Excited to have a great panel. They've never actually met in line before, never mind in person. So it's going to be exciting to see if I can weave all the answers together. But let's start with Felipe. Felipe in Boston.
Hi, everybody. I'm Felipe. I lead the technology team for Fidelity Real Estate. So in my role, I manage and oversee all the technology that supports our corporate real estate functions, all the way from lease management to reservation systems for spaces.
Great. And Felipe, you have one of, I think, the most underutilized and much needed roles in our industry, which is, somebody centrally for real estate technology. Our next guest, my very good friend, Kim Castle, used to run a similar role for MetLife. So Kim, could you just give yourself a brief intro of yourself?
Yeah, hi there. I'm Kimberly Castle. I'm the head of workplace technology services at Buildingi, so the advisory side. As Simon mentioned, I'm a former vice president of global technology for the corporate real estate team at MetLife, and so was responsible for all the tech that they used and how that was implemented. My background's interior design, so I've got a little bit of everything, and I'm excited to be here with you guys.
Excellent. It's great to see you. And last and certainly not least, Minas.
Thanks, Simon. I'm Minas Apelian, and I lead the corporate venture capital group at Saint-Gobain. We're one of the world's leading construction products companies. I used to lead our North American R&D group, and we're trying to internally drive innovation and new products and new materials to enable better living spaces and working places. And through our corporate venture capital group, we're trying to bring new concepts into the company, helping to drive innovation.
Great. And I think it's, we have great coverage, I would say, for our audience of speakers. Felipe directly representing a corporate occupier, Kim, both as a reformed occupier and also really a leading subject matter expert in the world of real estate technology. And I think Minas brings such a great perspective as both a user and an investor in this space. I'm so excited for the conversation. My trick today is really going to be making sure that I can keep to time and get through all the questions. I know Kevin had that same problem last time, but I'll do as best as I can to run through this. And I think to start with, and really calling upon some of the conversations I had as preparation for this, Felipe, from your perspective at Fidelity, when we spoke, you mentioned something that technology needs to, and I'll quote, meet you where you are. Can you elaborate on what that means and how that's enacted at Fidelity?
Yeah. So what I meant by that is, there's still many uncertainties about corporate real estate and how we're going to operate post-pandemic and what the workplace will look and behave like. What we do know is that we will have a hybrid workplace. We will have people working remote and we will have people in the office. So we need technology that can meet you where you are in terms of if you're working from home or you're working from a Starbucks or you're working from a coffee shop or you're in the office, that we have an equitable experience for everybody. So I tie that a lot to places like conference rooms and virtual meetings. We went from on-site meetings to Zoom and Brady, what we call a Brady Bunch slide, that everybody has the same real estate on your screen. And now that we're re-entering the office, you have people remote that have their own slide, but then you jump into a call in the office, and then you're back to that zoomed out version of the video of the screen, which you're seeing 10 people. You don't know who's really chatting. You don't know how to keep track. You can't keep track of the side conversations. So that ability to meet everybody where they are, and the ability to provide an equitable experience across the enterprise without really having to consider where you're working remotely and physically. I think that's going to be a major focus areas for us as we continue to move forward with new technology adoptions.
Yeah, I think it's great that you mentioned those two key phrases, right? You know, you talk about workplace, you talk about hybrid. You don't talk specifically about the office, given how people are going to work going forwards. It intrigues me then, you know, from the perspective of being sort of the real estate technology lead, what does that encompass from a platform or a functionality perspective?
It encompasses a lot because there's obviously a system component. There's also a hardware and deployment component. So how do we create that experience for people that are not in the conference room and to see everybody's faces as they speak or their body language? So there's a combination of systems and hardware. Some things that are well developed and other things that the industry is innovating on. So to have a precise solution of what it will look like, I think we're still trying to figure that out. But again, there's going to be a lot of trial and error and experimenting as we try to move forward and provide that experience to our associates.
You know, I feel in my role advising clients like Fidelity, every day I'm coming across new wonderful technologies that purport to offer solutions to you know, a wide variety of problems. And I think shifting over to Kim, what are you seeing in terms of the trends with your clients and future tech to support their, let's call it workplace as opposed to office going forwards?
It's interesting because I think the big things, and you might be seeing this as well, is just the high demand for room booking solutions right now, and then also sensor solutions. So those kind of seem to be the big buttons right now that I'm seeing. What I'm kind of surprised by, and I think this was surprising to me when kind of the pandemic hit and there was this huge shift to going to these reservable spaces and going away from dedicated workspaces. Myself as an employee, I was thinking, I really just want to have a dedicated space because I don't want to be sharing with anybody else. And so I think that's just an interesting shift that the entire workplace is kind of moving in that direction. But that's definitely where we're spending most of our time, is really helping on software selections for those types of solutions.
Right. Yeah, I see the booking thing is intriguing just because I think, you know, if you have a sea of desks that are all the same, why bother booking them? And if you have a desk you're assigned to, it probably becomes more of a pain. And I wonder, you know, with the presentation by Robin earlier, the behavioral aspects of that, right? That if you have to book a desk, you're going to book one, whether you're going to use it or not. So surprising me that market is still as alive and kicking as it is. But I think we're starting to see technology permeating around other, you know, let's call it sort of desk or work scheduling softwares, right? To give you better connectivity as to when will Felipe, Simon, Kim, and Minas be in the office at the same time. When you mentioned sensors, which I want to jump on that, like, do you see a lot of value in investing in a sensor solution as opposed to just the data you can get from badge-based analytics?
Yeah, good question. I think it really depends on what your use case is. So I think that if you don't necessarily have the funds for a sensor solution, and even if you did, if you're really just looking to see how many folks are coming into the office or who's coming into the office, your badge data is going to tell you that very simply, versus spending a lot of money to put a sensor solution in place. If the use case is really understanding how the space is being used, because I think there's a good understanding that really the workplace has to be transformed because of how it's being used, the number of people that are coming into the space, and the reasons that people are coming into the space. The tracking of how the space is being used, I think is going, or sorry, what spaces are being used is going to be important. You know, I think you and I talked about this. It's not necessarily going to tell us how it's being used because a sensor is not going to be able to tell me that I'm actually working. I could just be sitting at my desk watching videos.
Yeah. Well, and I think it actually feeds well into Minas because, you know, to me, one of the biggest benefits of having actual sensor technology is making sure that the spaces you're using have been optimally designed. You know, the old adage that if you have designed 6-person conference rooms and you never have more than 4 people in, why are you building 6-person? And that does flow over to you, Minas. You know, as a company helping organizations construct new space, how are you seeing the future of technology in the workplace?
I think for us, when we look at technology, we look at it in a number of different dimensions. One of them is the materials used to construct the space. And, those are materials that, provide certain functionality, and those functionalities range from acoustics and lighting and thermal comfort and helping to affect the air quality. And I think that through the last 2 years, the requirements of what the space needs to do, or people want the space to do, have changed, and it leads to new requirements for the materials. And so, we're looking at how can we innovate around the materials to be able to enable more flexibility in how spaces are used, to be able to reconfigure spaces easily around the needs of employees, the needs of work teams, as offices change from kind of a working place to a gathering place, or places where people go to a fixed location to where people are working through multiple locations in different ways. And so, I would expect that over the years, as we begin to determine what the requirements of the workplace need to be, the materials that will be used to build those spaces will need to change, and we're trying to imagine what those solutions are and then try to get them in place.
Yeah, I know Nelly, I don't know if you heard the last session, Minas, but Nelly made a comment about walls on wheels. Hard thing to say, but I think some of those aspects of being able to reconfigure your space yourself, people might not consider those to be technology, but that I think the requirements that you have in order to support the workplace inside of those new movable walls are probably going to be very, very different. I'm intrigued with your role as an investor. Are you seeing sort of innovations on the construction side that will impact how the offices are built or utilized in the future?
Very much so. We see a lot of small companies emerging around the world that are trying to find more sustainable solutions for how partitions are built, how walls are built, how they can become recycled, reconfigured, not necessarily on wheels, but perhaps easily deconstructed and reconstructed, almost like Lego blocks in some cases. So, we're working with startups in Europe, in Asia, and North America that are trying to develop these solutions and get them in place. So I think our investment thesis in our venture group is to try to enable a lot of these small companies. We don't believe we're going to invent all these things within the perimeter of Saint-Gobain. So we're looking for help through the startup world.
I saw your eyes light up, and same as me. I think when you come across one of those just sort of little gems of a product from a small company where maybe you're not expecting to do much apart from chat for 30 minutes, and all of a sudden you see something that could be a real game changer. It's definitely a fun part of our role.
And in the past, it's been really hard for these kinds of new approaches to be implemented. I think the construction industry pretty conservative. Now all of a sudden you kind of have a different environment where there's an absolute need for these things and a willingness to experiment with what might work and what might meet the need of work groups, employees, occupants in different places. And I think in our discussion, I don't think it's going to be a one-size-fits-all solution. I think there's going to be a need for solutions tailored to the needs of different work groups, individuals around the world.
For sure, absolutely, that's great. So moving on to sort of the next core topic about on the employee side, and I think we would all agree, I would hope, that one of the biggest changes that we've seen as a result of the pandemic is the empowerment of employees, and the fact that nowadays employees can no longer be told you can't work from home because it's not efficient, because we've done it for 18 months, 2 years, whatever other implications of that. And I certainly have already seen technologies fall over because they haven't involved employees when making the decisions and testing. So Felipe, back to you again. At Fidelity, how are you engaging your employees in decisions about the right technology for their use and their needs as they start using the workplace again?
Well, I think engaging our associates has been a primary focus areas for Fidelity as we rolled out any of our technology solutions, not just on the corporate real estate side, but also digital tools that we use to support our corporate functions. So that feedback from our associates is crucial. We have different teams spread out throughout the corporation. We have a digital workplace team that focuses on that associate experience, on how we leverage our digital tools to support our day-to-day environment. So there's always a constant feedback loop and ask from our associates to provide feedback, not only after we implement it, but really early on from the design and kind of the concept mode of we have an idea. What are we going to do with it? Is it really worth it for the associate? Because from a real estate perspective, we're looking to figure out what the data points are, how we can be more efficient. But none of that will be, we won't have the data if our associates are not using the technology. So
Sure.
I think first and foremost, right, is making sure that that platform that you're building is built with the associate in mind and their preferences in mind, because we want to make sure that they're using it. We don't want to, create something so complex that they're better off not doing it. So, I think the simplicity of that, the focus on the associate is critical, from the design and the inception phase all the way down to implementation, and then closing the loop with some sort of feedback loop, so you can always constantly be improving your solutions.
I think that's great. Are there other findings that you'd share with other companies about what they need to consider when rolling out technologies in this space with regard to the employees?
Yeah, I think the other one that we've been very sensitive is something we refer to as app fatigue, and the how many apps do I need to download to be able to do my job at the office, right? Do I need to download one for space reservations, and do another one for work orders, and do another one for Zoom? So really thinking about why you're doing that, and do you really need another application, or are there things that there's efficiencies between other systems? Because again, we want to make sure that what we deploy gets adopted and it has a purpose, right? And it has a purpose from the associate perspective, so they use it, and it has a purpose from the real estate perspective, so we can leverage the insights that we're going to gather. So we're very, very, very careful of not saying we're going to roll out this 20 products that each one will have a different application or whatnot, because people are not going to download that. And what we've learned is, the biggest hurdle for adoption is downloading that app to your phone, right? You need to get people to download the app or the application to your phone. If not, the adoption won't be there. So making sure that they see the value is critical.
Yeah, and I mean, certainly something I would share is that, I've seen a lot of these systems and applications that demo fantastically as a standalone. But then when you try and integrate them with existing corporate systems, finance systems, HR, Google Calendars, Outlook, that's where they can fall over. And I think a lot of people don't think about that until it's too late. And when you have the user experience, for example, I book a space on my my cell phone, and I want to go and edit it on my Outlook, and I can't. That's going to put me off immediately, right, from a user side. So that's great. Kim, how are your clients engaging their employees in making sort of these technology decisions?
I think a couple things. Employee surveys are really big, and I think in the past they used to do like an annual survey and report the findings, and then maybe make some adjustments. But I think those are happening more on an agile, ongoing basis now, to kind of get that feedback loop more frequently. And then really understanding like how and if those apps are being used. I think we underestimate how smart our employees are. We expect an easy button. We're using, apps on a daily basis, social media. It seems like corporate real estate applications are just so cumbersome in some ways and so difficult to get access to when we're used to using iPhones and all these other mobile apps that are so easy. Sometimes there seems to be a gap there.
Yeah, it's intriguing because I think we're still light years ahead of where we were 5 years ago, but we're still way behind, normal commercially available systems and applications for sure. What are you seeing as sort of the central technologies that clients are looking at as part of their strategy to help bring people back into the workplace?
I think one of the big things that employees themselves want to understand is, if I'm coming back into the office, probably only a few days a week is what I understand, at least based on some numbers I've seen with Gardner. Only about 45% of people will be coming back sort of part-time. But I want to know who from my team is there so that I can collaborate with them while I'm in the office. It seems like it's just, there's no value add for me to come into the office to sit and work at a computer when I'm not able to collaborate with my team members. So really, being able to understand who is in the office when I'm also there, and having those spaces available to me when I get there.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point, right? Because there has to be a reason to come in. I mean, people talk a lot about, why you're coming back into the office. And in my view, the reason people will come back into the office is other people. you want to go there and you want to collaborate, you want to celebrate, you want to see your teammates, you want to have a reason, a purposeful intent for being in the space, right? It's not just a case of, I'm going to go into the office because you're telling me to, and we're seeing that pushback. And I think from the systems perspective, there's a danger potentially of having too much data that you're going to push out to people, but you need to give them the right level. And I think to your point, Kim, certainly understanding who's in, is the function that I need to reserve available, is the space that we want, usable, then that's going to encourage people back more, and maybe also, what's on the menu. Minas, for Saint-Gobain, how do you see the role of employees in adopting this type of technology?
So much like Kim mentioned, I mean, we're doing just quick surveys with employees to get a sense of where they are and what they need to be comfortable to be able to come back into the office. What's interesting is I actually was at our headquarters office in Paris last week. And one thing I noticed very clearly is that there's a much higher level of, many more people are in the office as a fraction of the overall employee base than, I work at our North American headquarters in suburban Philadelphia. So, they're in a very different place and they're using a different set of applications. So it was really kind of interesting for me to kind of spend a week working there, where there's a much higher level of involvement with employee. People are there, sort of interacting with food service requests and booking meeting rooms. Whereas, I think here in North America, we're still at a stage of, am I going to be at work today? If I go, what am I going to be doing when I'm there? So it's a different set of questions. So I think the kind of the engagement tools with the employees is really important, because it's a very, it's going to be a very local decision around what is needed to be able to, have the environment, that works for employees. I know I was talking to the head of our R&D center outside of Boston, and there it's a totally different set of issues that people are dealing with. And so staying in regular touch with them, being able to adapt to what they need to do their job, I think is going to be ongoing and, probably changing over the next, months, years, who knows.
Yeah, I think from my perspective, the biggest mistake companies are making is sending out generic surveys asking people what days they want to come into the office, right? It just serves no purpose for anybody and really doesn't serve any value in that. Minas, you made a really interesting comment that I jumped on when we got together about, space in the office as being a gathering as opposed to a workplace. Can you elaborate on that? Because I really like that concept.
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've pretty much learned that just to kind of do the basic functions of our job, we really don't need to be in the office to do that. I think everybody has kind of demonstrated that very, very clearly. And so now, when we're going into the office, it's much more around taking advantage of the opportunity to be with our teams, be with other teams that we work with, and just have more of a collaborative interaction. And so, I find myself that when I go to the office, I spend very little time at a fixed desk. I'm constantly kind of going to meet with this group or that person or something else. And so the kinds of space I need are more of just a place we can sit and talk, and it can be over coffee. It can be, whatever we're doing, whether it's sharing information or what have you. And so, I think it's more a matter of the office no longer being a place that people go to do their job. It's rather a place that people go to interact with colleagues and coworkers. And I think it changes the way the office needs to function. It changes the way it should be configured. It changes a lot of things about it. And probably, again, I don't think we have the answers to that, but it very much feels to me that the function of the office is going to change, probably irreversibly.
Well, yeah, and I think sort of, the ability to iterate on a design basis and to leverage technology to understand the data is going to be key for all of us. And we'll get onto the data points in a moment. I just want to pause as well, that if anybody in the audience has questions, I do want to make sure we have time for that towards the end. So there's an app for that, obviously. So, please feel free if you have questions to throw them in to the Q&A and we'll cover them towards the end. Moving on to data, I think one of the things I'm certainly thinking about and seeing, I was chatting with a friend of mine from AT&T, and they've built some incredible technologies to help track all aspects of sensor related data, badge data, IP data, and this wealth of data. They now have these impressive screens showing them things in sort of red, amber, green, but maybe aren't necessarily fully understanding what does the data really mean, right? What is it telling you? Felipe, from the perspective of Fidelity, what are you sort of trialing in relation to data aspects to better understand how this office is being used when people do come back?
So I wanna kind of follow up on Kim's point earlier before that.
Sure.
That sort of data is there to see, are people showing up into your office and how many, how many heads do you have at a particular time? And then the sensor data is really how are people using the space? And to your point, we're not going to track individual people to understand how Simon is going through the space. But as we design the office to provide spaces that can support the task that you're coming to do in the office, understanding that you're not going to come in here to do your heads down work. You're going to come here because you have an agile team, because you want to collaborate, because you have a design thinking workshop, right? We need to provide spaces that can accommodate all those different use cases. So as we design those spaces and we get them online, we do want to understand, are they being used as intended, right? In a conference room, do we see people operating the conference room at capacity? So it has a capacity of 6. Are we seeing 6 people or are we seeing 2 people, right? And understanding that level of detail will allow us to right size our solutions to better support our associates and the work they're coming into the office to do. So with that said, right, we are looking to leverage certain technologies. We are looking at location beacons. We are looking at occupancy sensors to really try to understand, as we roll out this new workplace, how is it, are we delivering what the associates want? Are they being used? And then how do we interpret that data to improve the product that we are providing to our associates? Because we do want to encourage them to come back. In order to do that, it needs to be a destination that they want to be. So if we cannot support how they're working, they're not going to come back into the office.
Yeah, it's a scary point in a lot of respects, because I think it's going to take a lot to convince people, to, as my friend Brett Houtup at LinkedIn says, to pull on their pants and go back into the office. And if you do get in the office and you're not having the experience you need, if maybe you do a lot of heads down work and you need a phone booth for an hour and they're never available because people are sitting and staying in them all day. I think there's so much that data can tell us about optimal design of space and use of space in order to encourage people that when they come back, they're going to expect to have what they need and what they want. It's going to be very easy for them otherwise to say, I'm just going to do this at home, which I think is a really interesting point. When you mentioned the badge data, I think, saying, and I love your perspective, right? That badge data really it's one of those data points, right? It's entry egress, or probably just entry information to understand at a volume who's coming in. When you look at the sensor piece, what are some of the pitfalls you've come across, as you go through those evaluations, Felipe?
So we looked at a lot of different sensor.
And you don't have to name and shame. That's fine.
No, I won't, because I think there's a lot of good, awesome products out there that can support the occupancy cases. But when we looked at them, there's a couple of items that we're trying to be very mindful. One of them is privacy, right? And not privacy as we define it, but it's really the perception of privacy that your associates have when you tell them you're going to put an occupancy sensor. How do you explain what data it's capturing, how it's capturing, and what you're keeping, right? So the privacy component is a critical one from an associate perspective. And then when you look at the technologies per se, I think there's a couple of factors. There is the sensoring technology and how you put them into your spaces, and so I think that's one factor. The other factor is the supply chain component, right? Understanding that, to Kim's point, everybody's looking at occupancy sensors, right? And as corporations start to request them, can the suppliers keep up with the demand that might come afterwards? So that's always, and again, I think you're seeing a lot of venture capital being thrown across the board to reinforce those supply and manufacturing components. So that's something that we're paying close attention to. If we decide to scale across the portfolio, what will that look like, and how quickly we can deploy, and can we have access to all the equipment that we need? And I think the other one is, the cost associated with them. It's one thing to put sensors into a brand new space that you're building, but for a company like ours that we have a lot of built space, it's not cost effective to go back and retrofit and put occupancy sensors and run power or PoE to all these sensors. So those are always factors that we want to consider. And then the last one I'll say is cybersecurity. Right, there's still IoT devices that you're putting into your building. So the cyber security reviews and making sure that your cyber teams are aware and supportive of the technology is also crucial as we look across at least our portfolio.
Yeah, I think there's some great considerations, and one I'm going to off the cuff throw your way, Kim. But if you can sort of consider all of those different aspects Felipe talked about, one of the things he hasn't mentioned yet was really, when you do have this sort of vast amount of data, how do you interpret it? Like, are you working with clients to help them? Because that's what I'm hearing, right? Is clients saying to me, hey, great, we invest in these sensors, we have these programs, we have this analytics, we don't really know what it means. Like, are you seeing different roles cropping up to help companies understand what the data actually means from a practical standpoint?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two things that we're working with clients on is really why do you want those sensors, and then who is going to actually evaluate or help understand the data that's coming out of that. Like you said, if you're tracking all this data and don't know what to do with it, then why are you even spending all this money to do it? Right. But what I'm seeing really is occupancy planners are in such huge demand right now. And I think for a couple of reasons. One, because of the way that the office is changing and them having to be really agile and figuring out how we need to make those adjustments. And again, it's really that sensor data that's going to tell us how or where the spaces are being used. And I think it's really key for those occupancy planners to help the client understand the full story of what that data is telling them so that they can then make those recommendations in terms of how those spaces need to be reconfigured or reimagined. Otherwise, I think, you're spending a lot of money to put sensors in a ceiling to not necessarily get a very good return. So.
For sure. Are you seeing any new KPIs coming into play as a result of how workplace is going to be used in the future?
So I'm seeing things more on the being able to manage the effectiveness of communication. I think Felipe kind of touched on that. Like, if I'm having a conference call with somebody and there's 10 people in the room and it's difficult for me to understand who's talking, I think that's a big one. The number of hours worked. So now that we're working from home, I think there's always that risk of having folks working less hours and maybe not, fully and effectively getting their hours in. But I think you and I and probably everyone on this call experience that we probably work way more hours because we're working from home now. And it's just much easier to sit down at my computer and do a little bit of work and then the hours tick by. So I think there's this other, KPIs tracking like how many hours are being worked, is that good or bad? And is there a lot of burnout happening? The other thing, just last but not least, I think on the previous call, I heard somebody saying, hey, we have all this great coffee and no one's coming back to the office. And honestly, coffee's not going to bring us back to the office anymore, right? Like I think it was a nice perk to have when we were there, but having great coffee and access to all these great kitchens and food it's not going to be the draw anymore because it's just things have changed, right?
Well, I mean, and as an aside, I mean, I think to me, that's the biggest danger in how people are in some respects phasing return to office and letting back those people that want to go back, because the people that really want to go back are going back. And from what I hear from people I speak with in certain areas, they're having the worst possible experience because they go back into the office. They have to do their health attestation. They have to be sat at their desk wearing a mask. They have to have a partition between them and their colleague. There's no food services available, right? So the people that actually do want to be back, right? The 10%, the numbers I read of Gallup, right? Yeah. Only 10% of people want to be back in the office permanently. If those people are going back and having a, excuse my French, crappy experience, then they're not going to want to keep coming back. And I think that's a big challenge. And I think, the data and I think sort of understanding the information of how, when, and where people are coming back, and also the why is going to be really critical. Minas, in terms of, let's just make a slight move from a technology perspective, but what are you seeing in terms of data needs for tracking building performance, right? Because I think when we think about the things, Kim made a fantastic point. So what, you have great coffee. Going forwards, I'm going to be more concerned about things that are going to maybe impact my health or my experience in the space. What kinds of things are you looking at Saint-Gobain in terms of those data elements that you're trying to track and make available?
Yeah, so there's already a lot of data collected on buildings, right? So energy consumption, lighting, and so we already have a whole suite of tools and means of collecting this data. But as you point out, I mean, now we're trying to also figure out where people have been and where we have to go and sanitize spaces and get them cleaned and provide, confidence to people that all of that is happening. It's happening in a timely way. One of the things we're focused on, and I think, Kimberly and Felipe have covered a lot of this, is that trying to take all of this information and provide it back to managers so they have something that they can use to be able to communicate effectively with their teams and really provide them with something that helps them, manage the employee experience so that, it isn't so crappy, which it obviously can be. And so that's actually quite a challenge is, how do you kind of package all of this and provide it back in a way that helps people make better decisions and communicate in a practical way to people that's timely and just useful to them. And, I'm not sure we have the answer to that, but, we take the whole approach with our office building of treating it as a bit of a laboratory. We kind of designed it and with the idea that we can learn about how things work. And so we're trying to extend that to, how we can adapt to the needs of employees and use the information that we're collecting to provide useful inputs and get feedback from them on what's helpful, what's less helpful, and kind of, lean into the things that people find useful.
Yeah, I think things like IAQ, probably didn't matter as much a couple of years ago to people and all become more of a driver for some of the decisions that they're looking at making. So
Yeah,
I think
it's
that's
funny. I mean, we used to spend a lot of effort trying to measure formaldehyde levels in the air because it is a, important thing that affects health, but nobody really understood it or cared about it. But now, we're measuring things that people do understand. We're all kind of, amateur virologists now, and we all want to know about these things. And there's a demand for this information.
Yeah, no, for sure. I can tell by the fact the room is starting to get busy, and I see my good friend Mr. Beckerman in the background. We're getting close to the end of our time, but if there are any questions from the audience, please feel free. If not, I certainly have a few things that I want to ask, and I think the first one I want to see is, for all of you, right? Are you seeing a greater influence from the C-suite regarding workplace technology, which something a year and a half ago they didn't really care about? Felipe, maybe I can start with you.
I think it's changed dramatically from our perspective. I think a lot of our real estate system were considered kind of back of the office support of our corporate real estate function, and now it's going to the front end. This is how we're going to engage our employees. This is how we're going to bring them back. We need the technology to support them, and that's been highlighted through by our interest from our C-suite in terms of, are we providing the right associate experience? Are the apps or applications or system doing what they're supposed to be doing and supporting that new way of working? I think there's a lot more requests for transparency and visibility all the way up of the reporting chain.
Yeah, I'm certainly seeing, actual requests coming from people I've known for years saying, hey, our CEO has told us we have to buy a sensor solution. What do we do? And I think that visibility is very different. Kim, same question to you. Are you seeing sort of more of an influence from the C-suite than we have with your clients?
Yeah, and I think they mentioned on the previous panel was, in the past, things have really worked in silos, right? Between space and people and et cetera. And I think what's going to be really important as we move forward, and I think we're already seeing that shift, is just as Felipe mentioned, the CEO or the C-suite is really bringing that to the forefront. And we need to have the collaboration from HR and finance and kind of all of those pieces and parts, because they really all do play an integrated role in making sure that getting folks back to the office safely and in a good fashion and have a good experience when they get there is going to be key. Yeah,
it's interesting. I think because of the way that things are changing, I'm seeing way more questions on panels about things like taxation and labor laws and, allowing employees to work out of state than I've ever seen before. And I think that's something that we need to address. And it's intriguing as well, because I think, real estate and facilities to a degree probably wanted to be more front and center, but we've never been as front and center, I think, than we are now. Minas, what are you seeing with Saint-Gobain? Are your C-suite, are they interactive in terms of helping sort of plan for the future of work?
Yeah, very much so. And in fact, from my seat, managing our venture capital group, we've really emphasized, investment toward new startups that are providing solutions that help in any aspect of this problem. And so there's a real interest in looking at what are the new kind of innovative approaches being taken and how we might be able to support those emerging companies and help them pilot some of their technologies. And so, yeah, there's a constant barrage of email asking questions.
Sure. Yeah, and I can certainly see that. And I think one of the things that we're maybe not seeing as much of, but we will, I think, is changing metrics driven by the C-suite when it looks at real estate, right? I consider things like, cost per square foot and square footage per employee to be pretty redundant when we start considering, attrition costs of if you lose your best employees because they don't have a seat just in case. So brokers will love me saying that because I don't normally say positive things about the future of space. We have a question from the audience. So where is the budget coming from for sensor software deployments? Is it coming from return to office dedicated budgets, FM or other? Anybody want to grab that?
I'm seeing a combination of those things. I think that there is a dedication to the return to office programs. And so they are setting budget aside in order to address the, get back to the office safely. Sometimes that budget is sitting within the corporate real estate team and they do have a portion of that, but I think a lot of it is pulling from special projects that they're putting in place to address that return to the office.
I think at Saint-Gobain, we're in a little bit of a unique place that, in addition to that, we have actually quite a bit from our R&D organization that's coming in and looking at that as kind of a learning investment. So,
in our case, I think I'll agree with Kim. It's coming from a bunch of different places because we, HR has a say and they keep their budget from an employee relationships perspective. Obviously, real estate has their own, focused budget to return to office. I think also, physical security, cyber security, all of these different teams have a say in what's going to happen with our technology. So the budget, it's not a fixed set aside. I think it's coming from a lot of stuff. And in the real estate side, I think most of us on the corporate real estate had a slowdown in your capital investment. So there are some monies left over from that capital budget that could be redeployed to address some of this new emerging technology and redeploy that budget to other areas.
Great. One thing I've thought about quite a lot, and Felipe, it came up on our conversation, but I firmly believe that, with the changes that we're seeing in the future of work, and certainly with the fact that we're looking at collaboration tools as being a key driver, I definitely am seeing that or predicting that things like companies like Google and Slack, Salesforce, ServiceNow, et cetera, are going to get more and more into the traditional workplace space. I think the ability they have to access data that is unheard of for us, the ability they have to create environments where it's easy to collaborate, it's easy to schedule space is a big thing. How do you think having the Googles of the world and the Salesforces of the world in sort of a traditionally small real estate tech space is going to foster innovation? Do you think it's going to, do you think it's going to destroy some smaller companies, or do you think it's going to be seen as a positive as we go forwards?
I'll take that first, Kim. I think I see a little bit of both. I think the market is there's a lot of different players in the market. So we know that when the big firms come involved, we will see consolidation and acquisitions across the board. So we kind of expect that. But at the other side is the benefit of that is right now when we look at a lot of our technology partners and we try to put them on a regulated environment that we have internally from a security perspective, a lot of the firms or a lot of the startups cannot meet our security requirements or infrastructure requirements. So having that backbone and capital of big firms that have used to historically done and be able to support companies like ours on a bigger scale, I think will drive some of that of that uptick in performance and making sure that the solutions that we're seeing can actually be deployed and implemented by large enterprise across our portfolio. So I think it's a little bit of both. But again, it's been 2 years full of innovation, and I think we're just getting started. So yeah, there's going to be acquisitions, but there are going to be things that we haven't thought of yet.
I think that's a great way to end, Felipe. 2 years full of innovation. We haven't got to start it. I couldn't agree more. I want to thank all of you for the time in prepping for this, and obviously the time today. I think it's been a really fascinating conversation, and thanks to Chris and Crowd Comfort for having us. And I'm excited to kick a seat back and watch the esteemed panel coming up next.
Thank you.
This is great. Thank you so much, everybody.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.